Hello and welcome to India Inc. on the Move, a virtual summit brought to you by CNBC TV-18 and MoneyControl in collaboration with Rockwell Automation. And this year's theme is focused on Innovate Your Future, where manufacturers will come together on a single platform to decode manufacturing ecosystems to enable India to become the factory of the world. But to lead into the future, you need agile organizations and you need inclusive leadership. And that brings us to the topic for this session, navigating crisis through inclusive leadership. Leadership was never easy, but in these volatile, uncertain, and ambiguous times, it is more important than ever to lead with inclusivity. And that's why we are here with a panel of industry experts to help us decode how to lead inclusively. Leaders, as we discussed, have to be more empathetic, authentic, compassionate, and inclusive while they're managing people through these ambiguous and changing circumstances. So, according to you, what does it take to create an inclusive culture at organizations, and how would you define inclusive leadership?
So, let me take the second part first, Ruchika,
Sure.
in terms of what inclusive leadership means to me.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody in an organization, is bound to happen that people will come in and represent different thought processes, different backgrounds. In a country like India, or also more and more when organizations become global, there would be representations in terms of different races, religions, and today, probably different sexual orientations. So everybody will have a different point of view. Inclusive leadership is when a leader has the ability to not get biased and has the same approach towards everybody, provides an equal platform to everybody, gives the same opportunity to everybody to speak. The leader's response to everybody's same, and it's not colored or not impacted by your point of view or your unconscious biases in any way. So that's inclusive leadership to me. In terms of how can an organization promote it within their own, one of the things that we need to realize is that if you need to promote a certain behavior, you need to discourage the opposite behavior. So if we are talking about an organization to promote inclusive behavior across the hierarchy, you need to ensure that the opposite, which is a non-inclusive behavior, gets called out and it gets discouraged at every level.
How can organizations create a zero tolerance policy towards unconscious biases? And as Dilip also mentioned, how do we work towards creating a culture, a terminology which is inclusive?
I think wonderful examples quoted by Dilip, and I think I'll just borrow and build on something that he mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest challenge with unconscious biases and the resulting microaggressions is that it is unconscious.
Absolutely.
Right? That's the starting point. And that's the biggest challenge. You can respond to something once it surfaces, once you recognize the challenge. Then I'm sure organizations and people are well-meaning. I keep saying this, you need to believe that people are well-meaning. But the biggest thing is to recognize a problem, right? So the first thing is, how do you make that unconscious bias to something that people are conscious about, right? And then you can respond to it. So the first thing that organizations really need to look into and observe behaviors very carefully. For example, a lot of unconscious biases seep into when you're hiring people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just because there's an unconscious bias, you hear somebody coming in from a certain institute and suddenly you put in a halo or a horn onto that person, and then
exactly.
and then when you interact with that person on a continual basis, till either your experience proves otherwise, the person either has an advantage or a disadvantage.
Definitely.
Right.
And which is why
then
automation
really seeps into everything that the organization does with that individual person. Now, the first thing is you need to recognize that this is happening. Right. And once you recognize that, then through systems, and everything can't be processized. Everything can't be an HR policy. You know what I'm meaning, right? So yeah, so it's more in terms of awareness, calling it out, and educating people that this is what is, and very important, in something that we call as the WIFM, what's in it for me. People need to understand why they should not do it and how its impact, how will it improve their productivity and their relationships at the workplace. Once they understand that, believe me, once everybody understands what's in it for me, their WIFM, their buying into a change is that much more easier.
Definitely.
Right. So it requires a sustained effort over a period of time, and then things change. But it does change, and thankfully, I'm seeing a lot of change happening across organizations.
Just before we wrap up, a quick tip or a takeaway from you as your closing remarks on how can leaders lead with inclusivity while being empathetic and approachable. So how can leaders effectively navigate through crisis by using inclusive leadership? What is your key takeaway?
Yeah, so my takeaway would be very simple. I would like to remind them and remind myself also in the process that please remember, more the disruption, more the opportunity to create value and differentiation in the market. So that you need to remember as an organization. Now that leads to, now if you want to do that, it leads to, it is important that as a leader you ensure that every voice is heard, every idea tabled, every opinion respected. Now that is only possible if you create a risk-free and judgment-free environment for everyone. Because as an organization in today's disruptive time, you can't afford to lose a good idea just because it was not given an opportunity to be tabled. Right. And so it is in your interest that you create a risk-free, inclusive culture in an organization so that every table is heard, every idea is tabled, it's debated upon, heard, and then, you just grow as an organization. So that would be my closing comment for every leader to remember. I'm trying to make it as personal to the leader as possible.
So Prashant, quoting you here, all voices need to be heard and all opinions need to be respected. And inclusive leadership is definitely essential to building a resilient organization, especially in the current climate and environment. And leadership has taken center stage due to the pandemic. So thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. And as leaders navigate through uncharted territory, they have a unique opportunity to examine unconscious biases and lead with inclusivity and empathy. Thank you so much for being here with us.